Hey everybody, this is herculespetix, founder, curator, docent, and gift shop employee of the herculespetix Academy of Comic Book Studies. Today we're going to be looking at The Jew of New York by Ben Katchor. I believe this is Ben Katchor's first graphic novel. For years before this, he did hundreds of Julius Nipple real estate photographer strips for various newspapers. And I believe he also did the Cardboard Valise strip, which was later collected. But I think this was his first graphic novel that was meant to be a graphic novel, a story from start to finish. Even though a lot of these strips, a lot of the content of this did appear in newspapers, but this is a fully realized graphic novel. It's amazing too. I don't know if you guys know Ben Katchor, but he is one of the most unique writers in not only comics, in just literature. He has the most interesting viewpoint of humanity. It's amazing. Very Jewish-centric, very New York City-centric. But, man, his characters are just so amazing. Every page is packed with so many ideas, just bizarre ideas that are just very clever, but also things that nobody else would ever think of in a million years. And let's crack this open. It's a pretty nice little book, a little squarish book. And I do like this quote from the New Yorker I'd like to repeat. You feel that Katchor's work is a singular, surreal vision, and at the same time that it must all be true. And a lot of the stuff he writes is like that, where it's like, is that real? Is that some weird thing? Here we see the end papers are for the Lake Erie Soda Water Company system, and we'll find out what that's all about later on within the book. Very mysterious title page there. It's kind of neat. We have little stand-ups, cut-out stand-ups of all the major characters of the books. I meant to say of the book, sorry. And we start off. As you can see, Ben Katchor's art is, very unique as well as his writing. I love Ben Katchor's comics so much, but as an artist himself, I don't find his art that appealing, to my eye at least. But it's so perfect for these stories. There's no way any other art style could work for what he writes. So it's perfect. I don't even think about it. But when I take it out of context, I'm just like, yeah, he's not the best artist, but it's so perfect for what he does. So I guess I should just shut up since I love it. So this strike takes place in 1830 in New York City. We see this theater company planning their new season, their repertory of plays they're going to do that season. And I guess a popular genre at the time was a Jewish play. That was a thing, and they're usually comedies, basically making fun of Jewish people. There's one Jewish person in the company, and his name's Samson Gurgle, the set decorator. And so he's put in charge of the Jewish play. And I guess they already have a book that they're going to adapt called The Jew of New York. On that same day, we are introduced to Nathan Kishin, just getting off a boat from upstate New York. He checks in at a hotel, sees all kinds of curious things, and we find out that he's been living in the wild for so long that he can't sleep in a hotel room anymore. So he gets his bed sheets and he goes to sleep in the middle of this park across from the hotel. Meanwhile, Isaac Azariel, He's a button distributor, a middleman in the Oriental button trade. He's walking by and he notices him. And it reminds him of a lecture he once heard. So I think this was a popular thing at the time, that a lot of people would theorize that Native Americans were actually the lost tribe of Israel. And, there's facial similarities between Native Americans and Jewish people. I guess there's a few customs they share. So a lot of Jews who wanted a homeland to bolster their idea that maybe to get more allies were like, oh no, they're Israelites too. All the Native Americans on this continent in the New World. And so of course he sees Nathan Kishin and he thinks, oh look, it's a Native American just lying in the middle of New York City. Meanwhile, he's going to the docks to check on this shipment of mother of pearl that he paid for and is waiting for it. He's waiting for it to arrive from the Orient. And I guess it's late. Meanwhile, Samson Gurgle is thinking about his play and how he's going to pull it off, do all the sets and stuff. We meet Maynard Daisy. He's an actor in that theater company. In fact, he's going to play the lead in The Jew of New York. And I guess he just loves to hang out in restaurants all the time. He tells people that he's making up for the meals he missed as a young man. So he's just constantly eating. And he's thinking to himself, how am I going to play a Jew? I've only met 2 Jews in my life. One of them, of course, being Samson Gurgle, the set decorator. The thing with Ben Katchor is so amazing. Is I can't read the whole graphic novel to you, but pretty much every panel, or every other panel, has some really interesting idea. Just a really imaginative, weird concept that any other writer would, you could expand one of these panels into a great little short story. But he just tosses them off like candy. He's just he has so many great ideas that are just so bizarre. So now we find out about the origin story of Nathan Kishin. So he was a butcher in New York City, and there was some kind of scandal involving kosher tongue, cow tongue. I don't quite even understand it, but somehow I think kosher tongue got mixed up with non-kosher tongue. He was held responsible, and basically he was his butchering license was revoked. And he notices this sign on the wall. And this is the only true thing in this graphic novel, apparently, from what I've read in reviews. In the 1820s, there was a real politician/writer named Mordecai Noah. And he tried to find a Jewish homeland up near Niagara Falls on this little island and he named it Ararat. And it's such a fascinating bit of history. I want to read about it. It failed really quickly. It barely lasted. He went up there with some followers. I think they were there for a month, and then they just turned around and went back to New York City. But our hero here, Nathan Kishin, he's one of the few who will go to this colony. Meanwhile, we meet the mysterious man in the Indian rubber suit who likes to take his daily walk in the canals of New York City. So he has this strange waterproof suit. While he's doing it, he is reading one of these pamphlets about how the Native Americans and the Jews are connected. And that's the end of the first part. I love this how in between every chapter, they have this ephemera from the time. Here's the playbill from the Jew of New York play. Here's one of those tracts or pamphlets about Native Americans and Jews being connected. The actual cover, well, not actual, I don't think it's real. But they do try to get the fonts look old-timey, Whoever did the graphic design did a good job. So Nathan Kishin wakes up in the park, And he's walking around seeing how New York City has changed so much since he's been gone. He's been gone 5 years in the wilds of upstate New York. And someone recognizes him from his past. And this is Mr. Mara. And he says, "Oh, please, let me buy you lunch and buy you a drink. I want to catch up with you." So basically, he tells Mr. Mara the whole story about how he went up to Buffalo and he saw the Mordecai Noah's followers, having these parades basically, and how they bought up this island and they invited all the Jews of the world to come live there. They wanted it to be like a new Palestine, basically. And while he's watching this parade, while Nathan Kishen's watching this parade, this like fur trapping looking dude comes up to him and is asking him all these questions. And he later finds out that this guy, he made a small fortune leasing equipment to local trappers and taking the proceeds in beaver pelts. So he's basically got a fortune of beaver pelts, this guy, even though he looks like Grizzly Adams. So I guess there's all these problems with the colony right from the start. There weren't enough ferries to get people over there. And Nathan has got his heart set on getting over there and joining the colony. He basically wants to be their butcher. He can't find any hotels that are open, and so that fur trapper sees him and says, "Hey, I got plenty of spare room where I live." It turns out it's just the woods. This guy just lives out in nature. And this guy's name is Moishe Ketzelboard. We don't find his name out for a long time. So Nathan continues telling his story to Mr. Mara. And this Moishe is quite a character. He lives out in the woods. But he has this intimate knowledge of Broadway. And mainly because there's this one actress, Miss Patella, and he is obsessed with her. And strangely enough, he doesn't even want to see a play. He's like, "I don't want to be cooped up in a theater for 2 hours." He's just totally happy clipping out newspaper headlines about Miss Patella and play advertisements with her picture on it. So it turns out that before Nathan can even try to get a ferry to the new colony of Ararat, it's already done. Basically, Mordecai Noah and his followers are already heading back to New York. They find out from these Native Americans. And it's so weird. So now he just decides to hang out with Moishe. And Moishe tells him about his life. So apparently, Nathan notices he's not really an outdoorsman. He's not really a woodsman. He's basically an open-air accountant. He's just a middleman, sells stuff to trappers, collects the beaver pelts. He doesn't actually do the work himself, but he lives like they do. I mean, it turns out basically he's got a wife and kids. He's got a beautiful house on the shore of Lake Cayuga, but that's kind of all in his past. Even though technically he's still married to her, I guess in his business dealings, he just fell in love with, the outdoors and just stopped going home. Writing letters to his wife every now and then. We see a picture of his poor wife there. He just abandons her, basically. We see more of these Miss Patella drawings of her plays. And basically that's all he talks about. He's so obsessed with Miss Patella. And then we find out that basically a couple times a day he does this daily ritual. And I mean, it's the ritual we all know. He basically just pins up these pictures of Miss Patella and masturbates out in the woods. And Nathan catches him a few times like, "Oh man, this is weird." Here we see him putting all the pictures up. Nathan tells Mr. Mara, thankfully he did not proselytize or in any way try to include me in these ceremonies. See, I mean, this is a big part of the graphic novel, but, I mean, even though this is more than just a panel or two, this is, like, these two characters living in the woods. I could read this for 700 pages, you know. This could be a huge graphic novel just about these two. But there's many more characters we're going to be introduced to. So, basically, they split up eventually. And, oh, I'm sorry. I got ahead of myself. In winters, they would spend times in hotels. Because it's freezing up there. They would survive. But even when it's freezing, Noah still wants to sleep outside in his bed sheets. More of that ephemera. Just more tracks and stuff. So Nathan's still telling Mr. Mara about his time back in the woods. It's weird, one winter, when the snows start melting, all around the woods, there's all these biblical tracks everywhere. I don't know how they got there. They're still legible, even though they're water damaged. And a lot of them are those things connecting the Native Americans with the Jews. But then something bad happens. Moishi Ketzelboard realizes that the beaver are dying out. More and more people see his beaver hat and say, oh man, I haven't seen one of those in years. I haven't even seen a beaver in years. And even though his livelihood is based on killing beavers, it really sends him into this almost existential despair. And he just starts obsessing about beavers and extolling their virtues, reading all these books about beavers and just being like, oh, the beaver was the finest animal. And he's just quoting all these various facts about beavers all the time, crawling into their dams. He seems like he's snapping. He's kind of lost his mind, even though he still finds time to worship Miss Patella in his own way. And he notices that Moishi starts acting more bestial, crawling around on all fours. Sounds like he's going nuts. So in the fourth year in the wilderness, they came upon this Jewish commune, and I think it's called New Afflatus. And this is just so science fiction-y, this part of it. But who knows? If you read history's pretty weird. I don't know if this is based on something real, but this Jewish commune, they're kind of like leader, Septum Dandy. He says, call us free oxygenators, air bathers, wind worshippers. Our goal, to see to it that this free, ubiquitous gift is not turned into a tawdry commodity. So their whole thing is about the free flowing of air. All their edifices are like very breezy and open. This is one of the buildings here. Barely any walls. There's no walls at all, actually. And it seems pretty nice, though. And they're total vegetarians. The thing that sustains them the most is these giant sunflowers. They eat its seed, drink its oil, and weave their clothing from the stalk. Kind of keeps the thing going. And basically the Septum explains to them that, like, yeah, we escape the cities, just like you escape a plague, you know. Man's not supposed to live that way, being a wage slave. So they're kind of communistic. They realize that capitalism is just this dead-end street where you just work and work to make some other guy rich. But then Moishi, he starts, his animalistic ways of running around naked and bathing immodestly in a reflecting pool, licking himself. And also, Nathan makes the mistake of slaughtering a turkey just for sport. I'm not even hungry. He was just bored. And so they kick him out. I like this, how the caption says, "We were encouraged to leave." But it looks like they're throwing rocks at them. Like they're chasing them the hell out of there. So then after this, Quetzalboard moved to the west in search of living beavers, and he got on the boat that took him to New York City. So that's the end of his wilderness days. Here's the Declaration of Independence translated into Hebrew. That's what the oxygenators had there, that commune. So now we meet Yassel Feinbreit, and he's a Kabbalist and vagrant, and this guy's insane. He's a linguist who hangs around eateries and restaurants, and he writes down the sounds of people eating and drinking. He thinks those words, combination of letters which lie outside of the human language that people use when they're eating and drinking, he thinks that these are worthy words that need to be recorded and enter the English language. It's just such a weird idea. So Nathan returns to his hotel room with Mr. Mara in tow, and he shows him all of his beaver pelts and tells them how much they're worth. I mean, basically, Nathan's really rich. He even has an ice house up in Buffalo full of more beaver skins. We're back to the restaurant with Feinbreit, and it seems like just from hearing these words, he kind of goes into this ecstatic trance. He kind of passes out, and he has these visions. I do like the way Katchor draws this almost dreamlike state that he's in. He ascends a luminous staircase emblazoned with strangely familiar words. These are the words of, eating. And I like this too. He goes into a room of strange ceremonial chairs. I don't know why. I just love the way these chairs look. Just beautiful, almost like beautiful abstract art. The pages here, I haven't commented. It's like they're splitting the stories. So up on top, it's Nathan and Mr. Mara talking about the beaver pelt business. And the bottom is Feinbreit. So I guess when Feinbreit comes out of his reveries, he sometimes draws. He tries to remember what he saw. And he makes these almost beautiful Kabbalistic designs, which he sells to embroidery houses. And they actually become very popular handkerchief designs. So from that weird, his schizophrenic visions, they become just a scene all over New York City. See, right there, that would be a great graphic novel, the story of this guy. But it's just a few pages in the graphic novel. I noticed there's an interesting page layout that Katchor does I've never really seen before. Bam, 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 center. Bam, bam, bam. So you just kind of, I don't know why I brought it up. It's just, I noticed it. It was interesting. I've just never seen that panel configuration. So Mr. Mara basically is, I guess, convinced Nathan to become his business partner. And he's like, yeah, let's sell those beaver pelts. Let's get that money. But then he has a side thing that he already wants to start on. He wants to be a leggings. Is that what they're called? Fleshings merchant. Now, this is something that could only exist back in the olden times. There was a business, fleshings, for the theater, because there was all these plays going on, and anytime a woman had to be, supposedly scantily clad in the script, they couldn't actually be half naked. They couldn't be wearing something that was like a bikini. So they'd wear these silk tight coverings that gave the illusion of being naked or half naked. Just so silly. And the guy there also offers him a lozenge, Katchor and Pollux. This becomes part of the story later. So he buys a bunch of these fleshings. Basically, he's going to take the profits from the beaver sale, buy these fleshings, set himself up as the main distributor of these fleshings in America. He also notices that Miss Patella's coming to town. She's going to be in the Jew of New York. It's going to be her farewell performance of this actress. So he decides to send her a complimentary pair of fleshings because, she probably goes through a dozen pair a week. She could be a good customer. Also, if she wears them, all the other actors will want to wear them. He goes to buy some of those Katchor and Pollux lozenges because he liked them a lot, and he finds out that they're pure castoreum, which is a beaver extract, and supposedly these are like almost like Viagra. They help you out in the sack. So he buys a bunch of them. And now we have another great. This is just a fascinating thing, which I don't doubt is probably true back then when people were fucking nuts. I shouldn't say that. I mean, we're fucking nuts now, right? But nuts in a different way. So apparently there were these societies, these like anti-masturbation societies, and they're having a parade through the square, the Anti-Masturbation League, and just talking about how mainly that masturbation is bad for business. If the youth of today are not, procreating, they're just going to be hiding in the bathroom all the time, masturbating, and also not doing things like not making businesses and, not being productive members of society. These grand edifices you see here were not built by men lying on their backs, jerking off, basically, he's saying. This craziness. Okay, enough of that anti-masturbation bullshit. So Mr. Mara sees this rally, and I guess he used to sell religious things, religious like mezuzahs, and the sales have been dropping off. People are less religious. So he's just thinking to himself like, oh yeah, I got to get into this other businesses to take care of my family. Here's one of their pamphlets or their posters. Refrain from onanism. They say that we're giving notice that the practice of onanism is a form of treason, a crime punished by death. Wow. I love this. Just a menu from 1830s, just the weird things that people ate. Ben Katchor's kind of an expert on that. He actually did a whole book about these restaurants from 1800s and actually reproduced menus. Kind of fascinating in a very weird way. I'm very food orientated. I love reading about food and watching videos about food. So I found it very, very interesting. Now we're introduced to Enoch Latouchim, a Palestinian messenger. I guess his whole shtick is that he has a bag of soil from the Holy Land. Now, I guess this is kind of a good thing to have back then, because a lot of Jews, when they die, they want to be buried with like a little bit of the Holy Land, a bit of the soil. So I guess that was a practice back then. You could actually make a business out of it. So he checks in a hotel. And he's walking around, checking out how different America is from Palestine. And kind of fascinated. He sees someone blowing their nose with that Kabbalistic hanky. I wonder if this is true, too. Apparently, the Rothschilds, the famous millionaire family, they were going to buy Israel. The Holy Land back in 1830s. I guess I think they were Jewish, and probably the most famous richest Jews in the world, they were planning on buying the Holy Land. I wonder if that's true. That's a pretty fascinating little factoid, if it is. So now Enoch meets Francis Oriole. And Francis Oriole is the businessman who plans to carbonate all of Lake Erie. And that's what the end papers were all about. It's such a weird idea. And I guess he's very sad because he can't find investors. And he's even crying on Enoch's shoulder. He just met Enoch. Doesn't even know him. And he just basically hangs out at these rich restaurants and solicits rich guys coming out of the restaurant. He'll be like, oh, that was good seltzer water, huh? Wouldn't you like to know about my idea to blah, 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 you know? And most people, of course, all these rich guys are just like, get away from me, you nut. But eventually he finally gets some takers. Some people are like, yeah, I'd like to invest in that. Weird little asides like this that, like, to me are just, this one pager is just a great story. Enoch asked the doorman at this hotel, he says, is there any history associated with this corner of Broadway? What stood before the hotel? And it's almost like that famous R. Crumb Short History of America one. We just see time strip away and what was there before. And the doorman says, before that, you'll have to ask an Indian. Because, you know, he has no idea. He knows what was there all the way going back to, like, the founding of the country. And now Enoch meets LMNOP, who's kind of a celebrity. He's a Native American who this guy Herschel Gulbat has kind of discovered and taught Hebrew. And he gives, the LMNOP gives these lectures at the local museum. They're hugely popular. People pay like 25 cents to see him recite Bible passages in Hebrew. And this is just because this hunger or this yearning for a Jewish Native American connection is so strong in people, the Jews of New York. They really want to believe it. So this guy Goldblatt is taking advantage of that. Meanwhile, one night we see Isaac Azariel, the button merchant. He sees, it's a flashback to him seeing Nathan Kishin lying in the grass. And he realizes that he knew the guy. You know, and realized, oh yeah, he used to be that butcher who got in trouble with the tongues. But he basically goes to his mutual aid society, and he still thinks he's a Native American at this point. And so he goes to his mutual aid society, tells them about it. They're fascinated by this. They call up or send a letter to that Herschel Gulbat guy, because they're like, oh, we understand you have this Native American who speaks Hebrew. Did you know that there's another one lying in the park who sleeps in the park every night? But Herschel Gulbat takes this the totally wrong way. He thinks these guys are basically saying, we've got our own Hebrew-speaking Indian, and we're going to be competition. Sorry, just looking at the art. I guess sometimes I really do find this art appealing. So Gulbat goes to the park and is basically going to kill Nathan, or at least disfigure his face so bad that he can never appear on stage and compete with his act. It's weird as Francis Oriole's walking down the street and hears, you know, the sound of someone being thrashed or punished, I guess. And he actually thinks, oh, yeah, that's a good sound because that's what I'm going to do to Lake Erie and the people who live around it. Because he knows that the carbonating Lake Erie will be really bad for a lot of the aquatic life in the lake, and the Native Americans aren't going to like it. He's just like, yep, sometimes obstacles have to be overcome by hook or by crook. So then this character who we only know as the man with the stick, he comes out of nowhere and starts beating up Ghoulbat before he can hurt Nathan. And he's just thrashing him soundly. And it seems like the only thing he cares about, while he's beating him, he's saying, quiet, you'll wake him. That's all he cares about. And it turns out the guy, I don't know, he just came out of nowhere and just had humanitarian concerns for this poor guy about to get beat up just for sleeping in the park. But Herschel Ghoulbat talks his way out of it. He totally lies. Makes up this huge, tall tale, this bullshit story. So the guy stops beating him. And so he gets out of there with just some minor injuries. Goes back to his hotel room, tells the whole story to LMNOP. At the Mutual Aid Society, they talk about, now that they realize exactly who Nathan Kishin is, that he's not a Native American, they make overtures or make plans to bring him back into the church. Maybe they were too hasty by kicking him out, and he'll reflect poorly on the Jewish community, so they want to bring him back in and normalize him, get him a wife, get him back into the swing of normal society. Now we're back to Samson Gurgle, and Samson Gurgle's hanging out with the actor who's going to be in the play, Maynard Daisy. And, Maynard Daisy's having trouble getting into the whole Jewish character thing, so he's asking for help. Samson says, I'll totally introduce you to all my Jewish friends. I'll take you around. And he takes it, actually, here's Ghoulbat. Oh, no, I'm sorry. This is Isaac Azariel, the button guy. Wait a second. Okay, sorry. I was just thinking maybe he's the man with the stick, but I don't think he is. And now we find out that Azariel's troubles have gotten much worse. That ship still hasn't come in with all the mother of pearl that he bought. It looks like he's going to lose everything. And he passes out in front of them. He wakes up, though, when he rescues his pickled herring dinner. Man, I wish I had some pickled herring right now. That sounds good. And so it looks like things are coming together for Francis Oriel. A bunch of investors are in on his silly plan to carbonate Lake Erie. And, but then we continue to see Gurgle showing the actor around to the Jewish parts of the town. And it really inspires him. He says, meeting all these Jewish guys, I think I know how I'm going to tackle the character. I'm going to force the audience to see itself from his beleaguered point of view as an elegantly dressed mob of Jew baiters. And Gurgle's kind of surprised. He's like, oh, wow, that would be an interesting take. So now we finally meet the author of the book, The Jew of New York. And this guy wears this weird, creepy mask. Just such a character. And what's his name again? Oh, Professor Solidus. And I think he's German, and it turns out he's a rabid anti-Semite. That's why he wrote the play, because these plays are comedies, but they're really anti-Semitic. They're making fun of Jewish people. That was the basis of their popularity. People hated Jews, So they wanted to see them mocked. And I guess, of course, Solidus is very rude to Gurgle. And we find out a little about the play. I guess when it played in Europe, it caused riots. And yet it would go on to run for 700 consecutive nights. So it's a very successful play, even though, of course, it pisses people off. And it's very controversial. Meanwhile, the actor, Maynard Daisy, he comes up with this crazy plan because he figures, to totally capture the Jewish experience, is there any way we could pump the smell of pickled herring throughout the theater whenever I walk on stage as the character Ham? And they rig up this whole thing to do just that. Oh, I love it. Here's a poster for the LMNOP's recitations. Oh man, some of these panels just make me chuckle, the way Ben Katchor draws people. And we hear Solidus's, he's explaining to Maynard Daisy, the actor, his whole, anti-Semitic bullshit. And I was kind of, but it's like almost all of his plays revolve, like it's almost like he needs Judaism to make successful work. He says, I could return to the world of operetta with its Englishmen and Frenchmen, but it's not the same without the Judeo-Christian ethos as a backdrop. All you have is cheap burlesque. So strangely enough, he hates Jews, but he knows that as they're getting more and more assimilated in America, they're losing their Jewishness. And he's lamenting that because then he won't be able to write as well. So now we're back to, what's his face? Mr. Mara. And Mr. Mara, I guess, gets notice that the pelts are ready to ship from Buffalo, from Nathan's ice house. And he goes to tell Nathan, he says, listen, this is going to be dangerous. And I know you don't want to do, I don't want to put you in danger, but I'm going to travel up to Buffalo and personally escort that shipment down here because there's lots of thieves. It's the frontier. I mean, at this time, upstate New York was the frontier, it was pretty wild. So he says, you just rest, you relax, I'll take care of everything. But then it's a total lie. He just goes to this swank hotel on Broadway and gets a room for 2 weeks. The best room they have. And he's just going to wait it out in comfort. Also at the hotel is Miss Patella. And she gets the leggings that Mr. Morris sent her. And also in the same hotel is LMNOP and Herschel Gulbat, who rehearse till all hours of the evening. And it drives Mr. Mara crazy because they're right below him and he can hear them all night long practicing Hebrew. But he's like, I can't risk, being found out, so I just got to live with it, And then there's the part that's so odd. So Nathan gets a letter that says, your business partner, Mr. Abel Mara, was found dead in his bed in Buffalo, the victim of a robbery. He bravely defended the merchandise that he was protecting, but he died. And so Nathan goes to what is it called? It's called like the Burial Society. I guess they're just almost like a religious order of funeral people. That's how fucking bad my brain is. I can't even think of the word. Undertakers, I guess. Man. Funeral guys. So now we see that Francis Oriole's walking around with Enoch from Palestine. It looks like it's almost like he's made him his business partner, or at least his assistant. And they go to Mr. Mara's office. Mr. Mara was going to be an investor in his crazy scheme. But of course, this is like, the note says, hey, he's in Buffalo. And he's like starting to worry. Fred Sawyer's like, oh shit, he was a big investor. Maybe other people will get cold feet. And we see the dress rehearsals for the Jew of New York play. And Gurgle's not digging it. He's a little let down by the set decorations that he created and definitely doesn't like that pickled herring smell. But Professor Cilidas loves it. He thinks it's brilliant. And then Mordecai Noah shows up. So, you know, guys, I should have said this earlier, sorry. The Jew of New York, the play within this book, is actually a thinly veiled parody of Mordecai Noah, his whole plan to form this new Palestine in upstate New York. And he comes up to talk to Professor Cilidas, who doesn't like Jews at all. And he basically pretends that it wasn't about him at all. And he gives him all these cutting critiques about it. And surprisingly, Professor Cilidas kind of defers to him. I think even though he's an anti-Semite, he realizes this guy's kind of a bigwig, you know? Oh, and then we're back to our crazy character, Yosel Feinbord, who actually goes to the New American Dictionary publishers to try to get his crazy eating and drinking words in the dictionary. And the guy just totally leads him right out of the office after hearing what he's up to. But he's very polite. He's just like, oh, your work transcends the scope of our modest project. But they totally kick him out because it's obviously nuts. So apparently, due to a newspaper article and rumors, people suspect that LMNOP isn't a real Native American. The audience numbers dwindle, and they have to recast the whole act. I mean, sorry, they have to change the act to make LMNOP seem like a savage Indian who's in a cage, and Herschel Goulblatt comes out on stage with a whip all the time. These graphic novels, then Katchor stuff, especially this one, because it's 1830. I think this is he never really talks about times that old, you know? But it's kind of lighthearted. It's just very humorous, most of the stuff in here. But then there's just little things where you realize, oh no, those people were fucking animals. I mean, not animals, they were humans. They're just terrible, terrible people. And, you know, some of the things they believed. But just by looking at it, it's almost like cuddly. It's like, oh, these are all just like fun little characters and whatever, kind of harmless. Here's an ad for Fleshings. So now we see Moishe Quetzalbord again. I guess he's living in the wild, and he's just a complete animal now. He's really pretty nuts. But he reads in a newspaper that Miss Patella is doing her last appearance in New York, in the Jew of New York. And so he still knows how to use money and how to read a newspaper. So he gets a coach ticket to New York City. When he gets there, he's just running around like a nut, like a wild animal, on all fours most of the time. But he still knows how to get a hotel room. And he actually sneaks into the theater for one of the dress rehearsals. He's up in the balcony. And in the play, he sees, what's his name? I always forget his name, the actor. Maynard Daisy, like, puts his arm around Miss Patella. You know, that's part of the play. But in a jealous frenzy, Moishe jumps off the balcony and bites into the actor's soft abdomen, and he just attacks him like a wild animal. And a stagehand pulls out a pistol and shoots him, thinking it's a wolf or something. He doesn't even recognize him as human. But apparently, Maisel's mortally wounded. He's dead. And so is Moishi, of course. They shot him dead. So they literally, even after he's dead, they think he's an animal. So they just throw him out in the rubbish. News of this gets around, and Hiram's museum, the same museum that hired LMNOP, they find the corpse and they stuff it. They add a tail to it. They just thought that, like, oh, his tail must have got shot off. And they put it up in the museum. Meanwhile, that mysterious man in the rubber Indian suit, he meets Nathan. And we find out that he's a German who is studying Jews in America. So he's asking him all these questions for his research. He works for the Society of Culture and Science of the Jews. And then he starts talking about fleshings. Those stockings. I gotta look that up too. I wonder if that was a real big business back then. And then Rabbi Lopez shows up, and I guess they're planning the funeral of Mr. Mara. And his wife is there. But then there's this guy there, I think it's Hiram from the museum, and he's handing out all these free tickets to the show, to his museum, like completely not caring that people are planning a funeral. And they actually take 2 tickets. They're like, yeah, I kind of want to go. So Rabbi Lopez and Nathan go to the opening of the museum's new show, showing off this wild creature. And of course, Nathan sees him. And he says, I know this guy. He has a wife and 3 daughters. He's a baptized Jew. And the rabbi convinces him that, like, you've had a lot of stress. It's common that you would find some resemblance to this creature. But it's not who you think it is. And Nathan believes him. He's like, oh yeah, I must have been crazy. And so the Mutual Aid Society has a dinner in Nathan's honor because they're trying to woo him back into the Jewish fold, try to normalize him so he doesn't sleep out in the park anymore. We find out that ship with all the mother of pearl that Isaac Azariel was waiting for, it's sunk. So he's just totally ruined. And now we see Mr. Mara, who, of course, as we know, isn't dead at all. And he basically, I guess that was part of the plan. He's basically talking about how, yeah, it's almost like I am like Castor and Pollux. I spend half the day dead, most of the nights I'm alive. So he's assumed a new name and is living under a new identity. But he still has the profits from all that, the beaver pelts. And then at the American Hotel, there's this big commotion going on. We hear this commotion, and it turns out that it's what's his face, Francis Oriole. He's just ranting on and on about his carbonated lake, and then we just hear these sounds of like distress from Enoch. And when they barge open the door, Enoch is battered. I think he's still alive, and we see Francis Oriole with this, I think it's a shovel. So he just lost his mind from his plan failing. And then I guess that night the theater burns down. That was going to show the Jew of New York. And it looks like Professor Salidas, who was staying there in the third floor, that was like his room. It looks like he went up in the flames. And we just have this page about just how weird fire departments were back then. You know, they were just a bunch of basically gangs, volunteer gangs, who would fight over the right to stop a fire. So, of course, the building burns down because they're fighting the whole time. Instead of just putting out the fire, they're fighting amongst themselves. And then we see Nathan totally dressed up, not in his bed sheets anymore. I guess at that dinner in his honor, he met this woman. So it looks like he made out pretty well with her. It looks like they're on a date. And then we see the man in the Indian rubber suit just walking through the canals of New York and reading another pamphlet. And this one is kind of repudiating the whole idea that Native Americans and Jews are related. The end. Little, very tiny biography of Ben Katchor. And then we have these end papers, which are pretty amazing, because this almost is like if Francis Oriel succeeded. And this is like all about the Lake Erie Soda Water Company. And just the amount of detail put into this. Look at you can't even read this probably. I found this hard to read. You know, describing these plates of art. It's just crazy how much he thought this out. It's so weird how Ben Katchor, to me, I realized from I read Julius Nipple, one of the Julius Nipple collections yesterday, and I read this today. And it's weird how Ben Katchor really, when you think about it, is almost like science fiction. So even though it's not in the future, it kind of is in an alternate reality, but just the way that a good science fiction author will show you every part of a society. You know, Philip K. Dick would, in like a book about robots or something, but he'd mention how like, yeah, that woman had nipple dilation surgery, which was very popular at the time. Putting all these little things just about what life was like. And so that's what science fiction authors do all the time, except what life will be like. But he almost does it just about, in his other works, in the present time, all these weird, interesting things that could exist, maybe. They're not science fictional concepts, but the way he details them, to me, is the same feeling I get from a good science fiction writer fleshing out this interesting world he's created. And that's what Ben Katchor does to a world that already exists. Like, New York City is a real city, even though I don't think they, mostly except in this one, he doesn't really mention the city's name, but it's obviously New York. And this one takes place in the past, 1830. There's some true things in this, but everything he makes up, I mean, just the idea of carbonating Lake Erie, I guess that is a science fictional concept right there, but it's absurd and bizarre. So I don't know, I just can't describe really why. Well, I kind of can. Just Ben Katchor, I love his writing so much. There's no one like him. And the way he just creates all these imaginative concepts that are silly and absurd and hilarious. And they just flow out of him like wine. He just cranks them out. And yeah, I'm sorry. Sometimes I'm not good with words. Well, most of the time I'm not good with words. But that's why I like Ben Katchor. Just great stuff. Highly recommend this graphic novel. This is like one of those things where I just didn't want it to end. I was just like, oh, please, I want this to be 1,000 pages long. Just more weird characters. The setting, the time machine-like ability to almost make you feel like what it's like to live in 1830 New York. It's amazing. He's got an amazing eye for detail, even though those details are not real, but they feel real. So I hope you guys liked today's video, and I hope to see you next time here at the Herculespetix Academy of Comic Book Studies.